CZ is a free man. Holy cow, number go down. And I'm just going to say it. Daylight savings time sucks. Moish and I are going to break all that down and more coming up on Block and Order. Welcome to Block and Order, your one-stop legal shop for all things digital assets. I'm your host, Kyle Lawrence, and with me, as always, you get my vote on Election Day, Mr. Moish Peltz.
I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but welcome back, Kyle. It's been a minute.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what I'd be electing you for, really. I mean, some jobs.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know, I did vote today on Election Day. We're recording November 4th, 2025, and did my civic duty, so it felt good.
I did as well. You know, it's funny in these sort of off-year elections, it's not super crowded. Obviously, these are important elections, but there's not a lot of people there, and it's a very muted tone. It's a stark contrast to where we were this time a year ago.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I think everyone votes early in our neck of the woods, so going today on Election Day, not that late and like kind of early. And we were like the only people walking in at that time. So
I guess that's true. And Election Day, when I voted this morning, preceded what was something of a precipitous drop in the market today. I wonder what caused that.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a huge drop. I think Bitcoin got did it actually go under $100,000 or did it like touch it?
It went under 100 for a short spell. It hit 99. I'm not sure where it is as of now at night, but yeah, it did hit 99 for a while.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I mean, there was like unfounded internet rumors, social media rumors of something big kind of blowing up a couple weeks ago. There's speculation that might still be working through the system. I guess we'll see what happens.
Another day that ends in Y, internet speculation on something that no one really knows anything about. That's the way you go. Yeah. Well, Moish, it has been a while, as you so aptly noted. This is episode number 45, and we're very proud of where we've come to the show. And we'd like to kick off today with something that's a little, I don't want to say esoteric, but there's been a lot of talk coming out of the SEC with Chair Atkins and the innovation exemption. So if you don't mind, why don't you kick us off in talking about where things are with that?
Yeah, this relates back, I think, to our last Block and Order recording where we were talking about having seen Chair Atkins at the Fordham Regulatory Symposium. And at that time and since then, despite the shutdown in the government, so, we'll set that aside for a second, Chair Atkins is really driving towards having the SEC formalizing an innovation exemption. He claimed by late 2025, early 2026, again, like subject to delays in that shutdown, to remove crypto policy from this ad hoc enforcement environment to a place where there is formal rulemaking under a supervised framework. So there's also, as part of this, a launch of a coordination effort with the CFTC, and the exemption is framed as a sandbox-style conventional relief program that lets both crypto and more traditional fintech firms pilot products onshore under the oversight of the CFTC and the SEC, and then aligning with other broader efforts like the Genius Act legislation and other contemplated or actually granted no action relief. We mentioned there's been 2 no action relief in crypto now granted, and the goal of this whole thing is to curb this flight offshore and lower the cost of complying onshore and preserve some ability for people to experiment while maintaining investor protections. So, Kyle, I don't know. I guess my first question is is anything going to happen this year with the government shutdown? And where do we go from here?
Great question. It was probably a long shot anyway for it to happen this year. I mean, they got the Genius Act through. Market structure has been, was a bit stalled in committee prior to the shutdown. At this point in time, with the shutdown having gone on for 3 or 4 weeks now, it's November. Thanksgiving is coming up. Christmas is coming up. I just can't see realistically how this gets done in 2025. Even on a good day, that was tough. And next year, I mean, we're going to be in the midterms, and it's going to be a very, very tightly fought and contentious set of midterms. So I'm curious as to see where the focus is going to lie. And I just don't see this as being, for the SEC and for Atkins, obviously, but I don't see this as being prioritized next year, at least. We had a lot of momentum this year. We always knew we had a relatively short window to get these things done. They did get some things done, and that's phenomenal, but I don't see this happening in 2025. What is interesting, though, is to think about what this exemption could look like. And as I've given it a ton of thought in recent weeks, and you hear the things that Chair Atkins is saying and Hester Peirce and the other folks who work at the SEC, what they're doing kind of sounds an awful lot like garden variety securities legislation. You're talking about marketing standards and suitability limits for retail exposure and prohibitions on pay to play, lockup periods, tokenomics and plain English disclosure language, all these things that are foundational principles of the federal securities laws. So I'm wondering if an easy low hanging fruit thing would be to take the securities laws exemptions and just kind of retrofit crypto into it, which is what people do anyway.
Hey, ChatGPT, make these securities exemptions crypto friendly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, how hard is that? Well, I agree with you that I think the timing here is kind of just tight. I don't see how market structure can happen now unless the government reopens today, and that's the number one priority, which it's not going to, and it's not. So, I think all of this gets pushed out. I guess the question is, short of formal rulemaking being enacted, written, I don't know, enact is the wrong word, but short of that rulemaking kind of going into effect, the SEC probably has some ability to at least keep working, even if they're not going to formalize the rules under the government shutdown. So I guess the question is this still kind of proceeding forward now, or is everything on pause? And I don't know if we know the answer to that just yet.
Well, for whatever it's worth, and I don't know if this is indicative of how the rest of the government is operating, but the other day I had to call Edgar Filer Management. Edgar is the electronic data gathering and retrieval service, where if you're a public company, that's where you make your filings. And I don't know what prompted me to call. I assumed nobody was going to be there. And not only was somebody there, they answered on the first ring when I called, but they were actually really helpful. I couldn't believe it. So maybe that's the only person in government. Maybe all the staff are there. I'm not really sure. I don't really know the specific inner workings of how shutdowns work, if we're being totally honest.
Well, the flip side of that is the IRS lawyer that was furloughed and decided to live his lifelong dream of opening a hot dog stand.
Love it.
So
hey,
props to the hot dog stand lawyer out in DC streets. Hope you're staying warm.
I respect it.
Moving on to our next topic, Kalshi. Kyle, take it away.
Good old Kalshi. Well, Kalshi filed a federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York mere hours after receiving a cease and desist letter from the New York State Gaming Commission, which alleged, among other things, that the platform was offering unlicensed sports wagering via sports event contracts. Remember when these things were totally illegal, FanDuel and DraftKings and all that? And then the NFL made a phone call and boom, it all became legal.
Suddenly legal.
Yeah.
Now ESPN has gambling on its homepage. Great.
I mean, we're going to go totally off track. Sports arenas now have sportsbook, some of them in the venue.
Oh, God.
I'm not making that up. That's insane. Anyway.
Like in Las Vegas or like in real cities?
In real cities, and more on the way.
Real?
Yeah. They're either in the venue or they're right outside, like how that bar is at Citi Field, or so I'm told. It's kind of right outside the bullpen gate. It's like that. It's right there. Anyway.
Well, I mean, we're going to go even further off topic. My hometown Miami Heat were one of their players was just dinged for gambling on games or giving information away, allegedly, for games that he was involved in playing. And so I think this idea of gambling in sports, I think there's a lot of discomfort across. I mean, I know it's more prevalent than ever, but I think the fact that it's so present is causing a lot of discomfort. And you're seeing that, bringing it home here, tying back into these events contracts that are prediction markets.
This was a big NBA story. Didn't a bunch of people get dinged on this? Or
it wasn't just, it was like 18 players got indicted, including a couple an active NBA coach and an assistant coach. It is like a big thing. Yeah.
Can we bet on the outcome of the litigations that our firm handles?
Whoa, Kyle.
Asking earnestly. It's probably unethical.
I don't think so. That seems not only unethical, but somehow market manipulation. Yeah, I don't know. That makes me feel very uncomfortable. But to shout out Matt Levine, who we continuously shout out on the show, his update yesterday was all about Brian Armstrong on Coinbase's earnings call. Effectively shouted out there was a prediction market for which words Brian Armstrong would mention on his earnings call, and at the last bit of the earnings call he just rambled on like 5 or 6 of the words that were subject to that prediction market, presumably they allowing them to win the event contract.
Wow.
And so there's this whole Matt Levine was arguing like, first, like, why do we even have to talk about this? This just seems stupid. And it was only like an $80,000 market. So there wasn't even real money at stake. But then like, at what point is this market manipulation? And does it matter? Is it actually going to be enforced? Like the subject of Kalshi, right, in their litigation, which is where we started, and we can go back on topic, is like, well, is this a CFTC thing? Is this a New York, gaming commission thing? Is it something else? Yeah, but like, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. Well, I think Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame, but Kalshi. So to bring it back a little bit, and thank you, audience, for indulging us. But Kalshi is arguing, as you sort of alluded to, that in sports contracts are derivatives that are listed on a CFTC regulated designated contract market. So the Commodity Exchange Act's, quote, exclusive jurisdiction clause preempts these state gambling laws. And you see this argument.
And that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have federal governance over your activity, you don't want 50 states all telling you how to do or not do that. That's why you have a federal regulator.
But you get into this push-pull of where does federal law stop and state law begin? And that's a constant battle, because you see federal law struck down and the response is, well, leave it up to the states to decide. And then the other side gets in power and they say, well, we're just going to do federal law the other way. And then when you have such disparate laws, it becomes nearly impossible for operators like Kalshi to operate from. Sorry about that, but yeah, that's what happens. So, where does one end and one begin? I think Kalshi's position is exactly what you just said. Congress gave the CFTC the exclusive authority over these derivatives to avoid the total chaos from all these regimes, and New York's order is preempted. I don't know if I completely disagree with that. How are they supposed to comply with all these things?
Well, I agree with the notion that it's insane that we have 50 plus regimes that you have to comply with, and the fact that those could be inconsistent from jurisdiction to jurisdiction never made sense to me, especially now that we have the internet available not just in every state but around the world, and it's creating this patchwork of really inconsistent regulations.
Right.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could just have federal legislation that covers all of that? But I think from the perspective of New York, this is traditional sports betting. This is something that is traditionally left to the states or even, Indian tribes.
Right.
And states have lots of ways to enforce, licensing, age limit, AML safeguards, things that like states do for traditional betting. And, some of the court decisions here are also inconsistent, right? Some are saying this is a federal issue. Some are saying it's a state issue. So there isn't been like a consistent legal judicial approach to the outcome here either.
Yeah.
So, this is why Kalshi, I think, sees the opportunity to try and create a little bit of precedent in their favor, right? I mean, my notes here, the Maryland court already declined to enjoin state enforcement, and attorneys general nationwide are treating sports wagering as federally preemptive. So it's kind of still evolving.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially with something that is effectively a nascent industry like sports gambling. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where this was illegal everywhere. And so a lot of these laws are relatively new, and we don't have the decades of case law and precedent to look back upon. So we're kind of similar with crypto and blockchain technology. We're sort of setting the stage on the fly. And I think that, I mean, just by the nature of this being a young industry, you're going to have a lot of these scenarios where it's really muddy, where you have this push pull between federal and state law, and you have these states that have either taken certain actions or declined to take certain actions, which then leads into what New York's position is here. It's really interesting. This, unfortunately, Kalshi is kind of stuck in the middle of it, but they're fighting a good fight. I mean, I don't feel that bad for them. They're doing okay.
Yeah, and I have Matt Levine's quote here, which is, Kalshi poses the question: what if dumb bets that you and your buddies make because you are bored and like gambling were regulated by the CFTC? And that's, there you go.
Everybody read your Matt Levine. It's your homework.
Yep, that's right. You got to tell the associates to start giving pop quizzes.
And I do.
All right, on to our next topic. Valve's Counter-Strike. So this was a week or two ago. There was a major Counter-Strike 2 update. Counter-Strike 2 being one of the most popular video games on the planet, which this update allowed trade-ups from formerly ultra rare in-game items like knives and gloves. And then it triggered a market shock, which wiped out about $2 billion from the estimated roughly $6 billion Counter-Strike 2 cosmetic economy within hours. And high-end items plunged and lower-tier items spiked. So I highlighted this on Block and Order because I think it's kind of funny whenever there's this huge video game market for things that just blows up. Two, it reminds me a lot of NFTs. It kind of highlights the fragility of these kind of markets, that Valve can just unilaterally change the terms about item scarcity, utility, and then the whole market, billions of dollars just get evaporated. And it raises topics that we've talked about loot boxes and on-platform trading and consumer protection, and fundamentally whether blockchain rails, this is something that they're meant to solve, whether the blockchain can reduce opacity, fraud, and basically centralized trust on video game developers versus a more community-based creation. And then just last point before Kyle asks my question to you is, the whole, I've mentioned this before on the show, Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, is on record saying that in the 1990s in Russia, he moved to Canada in 2000 when he went to school, and all during this time he was playing World of Warcraft, and that one day Blizzard removed items from his beloved Warlock's Siphon life spell, and he went through this experience of crying himself to sleep and realized what horror centralized services could bring, and decided to quit playing and ultimately build Ethereum. So as I saw the story, I'm like, oh, the next Vitalik Buterin is somewhere, in his bedroom playing a video game, crying over losing $2 billion in market value from their Counter-Strike 2 knife, but hopefully now looking to develop the next Ethereum 4.0.
Yeah, I never really played Warcraft, but I did play a lot of StarCraft in college, and I was a big siege tank guy. But in any event, I love Vitalik's quote here. I mean, listen, this is why blockchain exists. I mean, it's a small use case, but you're talking about transparent rules. Putting skins on chain replaces these opaque, mutable databases and transfer history and enforcement by code, rather than surprise patches that these developers put on that are often janky and don't work. And God knows what happens to your items that you've spent months, if not years, cultivating. You know how gamers are. You know how seriously they take this stuff. They'd kill someone over one of these things happening. Tokenized items can be held in your wallet and traded permissionlessly, potentially ported across marketplaces. This solves all of these problems somewhat easily. I think. What are we doing here?
But I think gamers are just, the word NFT back in 2021 took on this aura of this bad, evil thing that gamers didn't like, and perhaps if there's some sort of rebrand, if there's now there's this kind of big incident where people are like, oh man, that's right, decentralized economies really suck for these kinds of reasons. And there can be this reset where people go back to decentralized tools like NFTs. But I don't know, maybe I'm just being idealistic. I think the market kind of took this idea and spit it out, and it's kind of died since then. So I mean, there was this problem. We found the solution, and the market seems to have not quite yet adopted it yet. So
I don't know. People get stuck in their ways, I guess. Yeah, they get used to doing a thing a certain way. Even if it doesn't work, they're still going to do it. We talk about the government shutdown about these things, but it reminds me. I don't know if it's a direct one-to-one, but I've been thinking a lot about George Carlin, just because it's election day, and he had this great quote. It's something along the lines of, I don't understand, older people with tattoos. He said, it used to be in counterculture days, you'd get a tattoo to piss off the squares. The squares have them now. So I don't know. It popped in there.
So maybe NFTs will be cool again. Is that the take home here?
That's exactly it. These guys will come around. I mean, gamers and NFTs, it just seems like a natural fit. I don't know.
I would think so. Yeah. I was a bit younger when I was playing StarCraft and Warcraft and Counter-Strike 1. But it would have been cool. Like if these items were, you could trade them and use them across different games.
Exactly.
But obviously the incentives for the centralized gaming developers, it's real. These are real businesses. They want control over their economy, not just for self-interested purposes, but for security and compliance and risk mitigation. So like, I get it too, right? There's reasons why they have these things. Consumer protection too, right? But because NFTs also, if you kind of unlock these gates and give away control, who knows what's going to happen. So there's a lot of market forces that have not allowed this to happen for mainstream like AAA gaming just yet.
Yeah, we probably just pissed off all the gamers, or at least I did, but whatever.
Yeah.
Come at me.
I think we just pissed off all the gamers and all the gaming developers and all the crypto people.
Then we're doing something right.
That's right.
Reddit filed suit against Perplexity, SERP API, Oxy Labs, and AWM Proxy, accusing them of data laundering by scraping Reddit content indirectly via Google search results as a means to evade Reddit's anti-scraping measures. Reddit seeks a permanent injunction, that's expensive, damages, and a ban on using or selling previously scraped data. Their complaint leans on anti-circumvention theories tied to bypassing technological controls on Google's and Reddit systems, and highlights a history of cease and desist correspondence with Perplexity amid a 40-fold jump in citations to Reddit content. The case lands against a commercial backdrop, of course. Reddit has inked paid licensing deals with Google and OpenAI, because, of course, raised API pricing and is trying to preserve exclusivity and monetization of its user-generated content while portraying large-scale scraping as harmful to users, infrastructure, and platform integrity. I have to say, when I first started reading about this, I was like, Reddit. It's basically like Barstool. All they do is aggregate stuff that's not theirs. But I think given the dollars that are at stake here and the financial interest that they have in what is effectively their data, I don't know if I necessarily completely disagree with them here.
Yeah, I mean, it's really crazy because you think about like the internet is this big limitless like thing of content. And it turns out it's actually really difficult for the large language models need so much data to train on, especially something like Reddit, which has real-time user-generated data. And they're trying to get all this to understand what's happening in real time. And it's Reddit, which I think it was almost a has-been at some point, has really been revitalized. And they went public, in the past year, and their stock price has really, gone through the roof since they IPO'd. I think in large part due to the fact that they are now able to monetize their user-generated content for large language model training. I mean, it's just like Google, OpenAI, and other API users, including Perplexity.
Right.
So look, I mean, this is what they're monetizing. This is where they're finding value. This is their now golden ticket. They have to step up and protect the golden goose, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what they're doing here. I thought it was interesting that they're relying primarily on DMCA anti-circumvention theories, which I think is like it's a kind of weird, like early 2000s copyright scraping kind of theory. So I think the legal theory is actually kind of interesting of how they're going after people here. And yeah, I mean, that's like, it's, I think from a business model perspective, though, they have to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to see how this turns out.
It reminds me a lot of when I first became an attorney, and I didn't really understand a lot about intellectual property and how it gets valued and how you protect it. And one of the intellectual property attorneys at the firm I was working with explained it to me that Coca-Cola, at the time, this is going back almost 20 years, they valued their intellectual property on their 10K at $50 billion. It's a lot. And it's like, well, how do they protect that? It's like, well, you have these random bars on the street that have rum and Coke night. They would have people drive around and say, are you selling Coca-Cola or something else? And if you weren't a licensed retailer or a reseller, then you couldn't call it that. You'd have rum and cola night. I mean, the worst thing that ever happened to Xerox is the word Xerox became ubiquitous. Nobody says, hey, go photocopy this for me. They say, go Xerox this for me. Guess what? We don't have a Xerox machine in our office. That's bad.
I will say, I mean, on the flip side, right? Play devil's advocate here. The idea of the open internet, of the idea that user generated content is not behind a paywall, is not controlled by a massive public company, whether it's Reddit or Google or Twitter, now X, whoever it is. It's I guess the question is, like, is this kind of public internet of the commons where there's public access and fair use and aggregation happening across an open web? Is that still a world that we live in, or is that like a far gone like history? And you think about like the users posting stuff on Reddit. These are like, this is user generated content. It's the users' creations. It's not Reddit's creations. And so it's great that Reddit has created this, amazing community forum where people want to spend their time and contribute and talk about things that are happening in real time. And that's what's valuable for training and Perplexity and real-time AI search. But it kind of gets back to like, well, what's the internet? Is this really this massive kind of closed wall place that can be monetized for, shareholder value?
Right. Or if they could, I mean, to really take it further, based on what you're saying, is there a world where Reddit becomes effectively the gatekeeper for all the information online? I mean, is there a world where that happens based on what they're trying to do here? Or is that just too catastrophic of a scenario? I mean, I can go on to Google.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can compare something like Reddit, which is taking this approach, to something like Wikipedia, which explicitly has, Creative Commons licensing on the work there. So it's user created content, right? It's kind of communally created, but then whatever is there is contributed in a kind of open licensing format, whereas Reddit does not have that, right? It's explicitly behind terms of service that prohibits, and there's technical measures that prohibit scraping and kind of mass scale taking of that content. So it's two very different, business models, two very different approaches to, user generated content, and fundamentally the intellectual property rights behind it.
It's really interesting. It's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, pig butchering. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if any of you watching this has been the victim of this, but it comes up a lot. I get about one phone call a day. Wish one of you lead us off on this.
Yeah. So there was a massive takedown by U.S. prosecutors who indicted a Cambodian-based Prince Group, alleging that this conglomerate ran a forced labor pig butchering scam, and the Department of Justice seized roughly 127,271 Bitcoin.
Jesus.
So people were a little concerned that the U.S. government had dropped down and only had, 100,000 Bitcoin and change. Now they've effectively doubled up, another $15 billion in Bitcoin, and was the largest forfeiture in Department of Justice history. And yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I, like you, get, typically at least one of these kind of, I don't know, calls, but like email inquiries a day. And we've worked on some of these. We've done tracing. We've provided information to law enforcement that has resulted in seizures. I don't think particularly this one, but it's just really impressive that this is something that was done. But it's also just really scary, the massive size of these schemes and the amount of money that's being stolen from people. It's just the amount of, you hear it on the calls, you hear it on the emails, like the amount of emotional harm, the amount of financial loss, the amount of damage that's happening to just ordinary folks that lose their life savings is really tragic. And so that part of it's sad, and it's just, nice to hear. This is like when you're talking about, what should government do? How should it use its infinite resources? Going after people like this, I think is one of those things.
Can't disagree with that. Obviously, we want to see, none of this ideally, but we at least want to reduce it to the point where we're not getting phone calls every day. I think that's a good litmus test for it. If we start getting, 2 calls a week, I will consider that progress in this world. But what's interesting is, when I was reading about this, is some of the overreach concerns. Overreach is not the right word, but when you have these expansive sweeps, you do sweep up lawful actors into the enforcement. Now, if it's 1 or 2 people, you say you can live with it. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. But the wider that net gets cast and the more innocent actors get roped into it, I think that's where potential concerns can be. I mean, we get phone calls where people have funds listed on an exchange and someone, a bad actor sends them, a small amount of crypto, whatever it may be, and now their account is frozen and there's no ability for them to extract it. And oops, all the while, crypto's crashing and they would have cashed, or, all these scenarios we can talk about all day. So I think that obviously it's great that we limit this and we eliminate it, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in so doing. And I think it's worth keeping an eye on. Yeah, it's awesome that we seized 127,000 Bitcoin, which you mentioned 15 billion. It's worth a little bit less today. We'll just throw that out there. But still,
sorry, 12 billion at market prices. Right. Yeah.
But nonetheless, if the cost of doing that is you're sort of shutting out people who in the aggregate have 150,000 Bitcoin and now they can't access it, that's where we have to be very careful of. And we're seeing a lot of, I don't know what the right word is, and I don't want to get political, but a lack of sort of coordinated effort and detail in a lot of these things, at least that we're seeing. So I think it's worth noting. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying don't do it. But the devil's in the details with these things. And I hate seeing people who are doing things correctly and acting in a manner that's compliant with the laws and with the terms of service of these exchanges just getting shut out of things.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. We've seen the harm of innocent bystanders having their crypto frozen inadvertently as part of a law enforcement act, like seizure or freeze or whatever it is, and that's kind of one of these things where the complexity of this ecosystem and the lack of centralization, there's great. That's why Bitcoin is what it is, but it also creates second order problems where people, like the crypto goes, through a scheme and it's tagged and then it gets used down the road in, innocent, just arm's length transactions. And it's like, well, hey, you got stolen Bitcoin. It's like, well, no. I'm just a guy that bought the Bitcoin in this other completely natural way, and now I'm roped into a Department of Justice seizure action or some other law enforcement activity.
Right.
So it's very complicated, and I think it's both the benefit and the curse of this decentralized ecosystem.
Yeah, bona fide third-party purchaser rule. I remember law school. Vaguely. That
was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It was just two weeks ago. I just congratulations to our associates who passed the bar, and one of them is getting admitted tomorrow on Guy Fawkes Day. Great job. You know who you are. Small companies strive. You've heard of these guys. A Semler Scientific shareholder has sued to enjoin the proposed merger with Strive, alleging fiduciary breaches and disclosure deficiencies in Semler's merger proxy, and seeking to block or delay the vote until corrective disclosures and process cures are made. This largely stems from their digital asset treasury. The complaint targets classic pressure points, alleged conflicts, fairness valuation analyses, background of the deal narratives, and deal protections, arguing Semler's board violated duties owed in a change of control scenario and that investors cannot cast a fully informed vote. We're seeing a lot of these in recent months. There was the DAT boom. Michael Saylor obviously is everywhere. He's speaking at every one of these summits. And you're starting to see some of these lawsuits come out. And, this is just another example of it. So, I'm not sure where to begin. Like, how do we begin to tackle these things? Is it just shareholders don't understand them, and because of that, they're going to fight these things tooth and nail? I don't know. I don't know what.
It's easy enough to say, well, there's just always going to be plaintiffs' class action lawyers like on the prowl, and the fact that you can just point and say crypto, ooh, scary, bad, fiduciary breach, that kind of thing is like, it just seems like low-hanging fruit for a certain type. So part of me is like just dismissive of, well, it's crypto, there's plaintiffs like shareholder actions, like it just seems like a match made in heaven. It's just going to happen. It's part of the deal. But then, you see, really interesting business models forming. You see really interesting M&A activity starting to happen with the DATs now. Like, I'm sure there's some now underwater with the pricing. And so people are looking at, well, the market price of the company is a discount to the, asset value of the Bitcoin held in its treasury. Like, let's go buy that company to buy some cheap Bitcoin. So it's like, it's an interesting dynamic between the whole marketplace here of treasury companies and operating companies and miners and everything. And then there's just like a ton of M&A going on in general in the crypto space, which I think is probably a bit of a contrast to like the broader market right now. So I think it's just like a super interesting place we're in, especially with Bitcoin crashing 20% this week. And so I don't know, like, Kyle, what are you seeing in the crypto M&A world? I mean, just like I think it's really interesting kind of watching from the outside looking in. I'm curious what you think.
Well, we're certainly seeing a lot of activity in the crypto fund side of things. People are launching funds left and right. M&A activity in general is kind of down. Rates have been coming down now finally, but rates obviously impacts it. Unpredictability in, economic factors obviously plays a huge deal. I mean, from my seat, if you're a buyer and you're doing a quality of earnings report on a company, whether it's crypto or not, I don't know how you can rely on the quality of earnings where we have unpredictable tariffs and international trade is kind of upside down. But from the DAT perspective, from the digital asset treasury perspective, we're probably going to see a lot of stuff come out in the days following this episode, because of what happened today with the crash in prices. But one of the reasons why we always favor Delaware is because they give deference to people who act in good faith. The business judgment rule, a law school, again, second time on the show. If the board
so tell me more about what does that mean? What's the business judgment rule as applied to an M&A transaction like the Strive Semler, and how do courts think about it? Is it just, well, you made a good business judgment in acquiring this company, so go for it? And does it, well, it's a scary crypto company, kind of play into that?
Well, in effect, what they're looking at is the process. Did you just wake up one day and decide that your company was going to be a digital asset treasury, or did you run a good faith analysis over what your company was going to do? Did you act in the best interest of your shareholders? Did you honor your fiduciary duties? If you ran an analysis and you had a board of directors vote and you excluded interested directors, and you opened it up to the shareholders, and everybody got a chance to comment and vote and explain their position, and your decision may not have worked out, But if in the moment you were operating in good faith and you had information, it wasn't just a willy-nilly, let's, throw this against the dartboard and see what sticks. If you do that, the courts are going to not throw the book at you. That's the simplest way to explain the business judgment rule as Delaware has enforced it over the centuries. Not every state has that. So if you're one of these companies that says, I want to go to Wyoming because Wyoming is cool and Wyoming has, Dow LLCs and all these things, you need to be really careful because Wyoming doesn't have that body of law behind it. And if you are going to be taking the plunge into crypto and you have investors who, hey, guess what? Investors, they may be your friends and maybe you gave them some disclosures and some materials. But at the end of the day, if you lose their money, that ship has sailed. They will come after you. And if you're in Wyoming who doesn't have the business judgment rule and doesn't have the court of chancery and doesn't have the rocket docket, you could be left holding the bag. So we don't give legal advice here on Block and Order, but just be careful. Wyoming is great until it's not.
All right. Awesome input. And that made me think of, there was another, Core Scientific terminated its merger agreement with CoreWeave, but for basically the opposite reason, which I wonder now if they're reevaluating in light of, again, the crash.
Right.
But the idea that we're so valuable on our own, given the asset prices, that merging seems like a less of a good deal now.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting too.
All right, Moish, we've done it. It's time for the lightning round.
First in the lightning round, Bitcoin to buy coffee. So the company Square has announced Square Bitcoin, a fully integrated Bitcoin payments and wallet suite that allows merchants to accept Lightning-powered Bitcoin at the point of sale with zero processing fees. So there's a native wallet that allows this to happen. U.S. rollout beginning November 10th, but not to New York customers at launch. And then customers can pay from any wallet using Bitcoin. So there we go. We're going to see mainstream retail use of Bitcoin for coffee. What do you think?
I feel like, haven't we seen this before? I feel like we've seen this in other places, maybe not as large of a rollout.
Not with like Square, which is in like every point of sale system.
Right.
And it's like, okay, anyone can use Bitcoin now. So I think this is the mainstreaming part of the journey where all this technology has been available to niche audiences and people have been doing it. But the point where you can just take like any wallet with Lightning compatible Bitcoin and any point of sale system is going to be compatible and like accept it instantaneously. I guess, people are going to have to opt into this, I assume. Sounds like it'd be pretty cool if this would become mainstream.
Yeah. I love coffee and I love Bitcoin. What's not to love?
But I like keeping my Bitcoin.
Well, that's
not
the thing.
spending it on coffee, even if it's like $4.
It's funny. I had that discussion. I was at the Bitcoin Financial Services Summit in Denver a couple of weeks ago, and I had that same discussion with somebody who they were selling wine, and you could pay for the wine with Bitcoin. And I was like, well, that's awesome, but can I just pay with my credit card and pay with cash? And they were like, well, no, you'd pay with Bitcoin, and then you would immediately just replace the Bitcoin that you just used. And I was like, that's just robbing Peter to pay Paul. I get it, but all that does is get you Bitcoin.
Well, that's the name of the game, I guess. Right.
You can just buy it with the money I give you. Next up, Roger Ver, the Bitcoin Jesus, reached a deferred prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice, paying nearly $50 million in back taxes, penalties, and interest tied to willfully underreporting his Bitcoin holdings related to his 2014 expatriation. Prosecutors have moved to dismiss the 2024 indictment. Although he's no longer a U.S. citizen, he was still required to report and pay tax on the exit tax and certain distributions from U.S. corporations. Under the deal, the charges will be dropped if he complies with the agreement's terms. I'm surprised he doesn't just get a blanket.
I don't know. This seems like about as good of a free pass as you can get. It seemed like he was going to be raked over the coals, and they just said, hey, pay your back taxes and you'll be on your way. So it seems like a win for him. I know we had discussed this previously on the show when it first came up. And the idea was, right, that when you leave, he was originally a United States citizen, but then he expatriated himself. And when you do so, you got to make sure you comply with all the rules of doing so. And I think he said that he had, and the Department of Justice took the other position there. So here we go. ultimately settling those charges.
I would think a lot of people muck that up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the punch. I mean, it's you just got to do it right, and he would probably say he did. So it's just like you doing it right is just super complicated, especially at that scale, right? So think about it before you make, hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin.
Ignorance of the law.
Do your tax planning before you make it big.
Yeah.
And we would be remiss to not mention on our show the president pardoning Binance founder Changpeng Zhao, or CZ, erasing his 2023 Bank Secrecy Act conviction, which was after he pled guilty and served 4 months in prison. So the move drew bipartisan criticism and ethics concerns, as Trump downplayed even knowing CZ in a recent interview. So it's interesting because this pardon now eases potentially Binance's path back to operating in full in the U.S. and potentially restoring CZ's ability to do business as part of that expanded business in the United States. So Kyle, I don't know what else there's to say here. The pardon happened. Binance is back. It probably isn't a good look for people both in and outside the industry. From a, I think there's some aspect of pay to play here that people are concerned about. The optics are probably not good, and there's allegations of some quid pro quo. But here we are. It's happened. It's in the past.
Yeah, we don't need to, harp on the commercial underpinnings of what triggered this pardon and the fact that Trump said he didn't even know who CZ was. There's been plenty of literature. You can go look that up. It's great that Binance will come back to the U.S. It probably won't come to New York, which stinks, but, we'll get there one day. For me, the biggest issue, and I've joked about the pardons in the past on prior episodes, at some point, all the pardons and all the hands off is going to, I think, almost have it will have a negative impact, because if the unfounded criticism of crypto is, oh, you're just using crypto to buy drugs on Silk Road, which we know is nonsense. But if you keep pardoning these guys, and you do so because of the commercial arrangements that you have with them, it's going to at some point delegitimize what we're trying to build here. I do honestly fear that's going to happen. And this to me is the biggest example of that.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with you. I think the biggest concern is just the optics around people feeling that there's a different set of rules for very wealthy people or very wealthy people in crypto, and that whatever happens reputationally sets back the industry, even if it's a short-term victory for CZ or Binance or whatever other player that may have been pardoned or benefiting from the current administration. So, look, you got to take you got to make lemonade with the lemons here. But I do think reputationally people should be thinking about, what is the state of the industry and how much is too much, where it's going to cause a reputational counter reaction.
Yeah.
And at some point, right, there will be, other people in power. And is that going to cause a big swing back because there's this perception of unfairness?
Yeah, we don't want an overcorrection. Midterms are coming up. Well, that wraps up episode 45. Thank you so much for joining us on the special episode of Block and Order. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to follow us on all of our socials. Links can be found down below in the show notes. Of course, if there's anything you would like us to cover in Block and Order, please leave a comment down below. We do take comments very seriously, except the ones where people just leave their seed phrases. Come on now.
Yeah, scammers can get lost. Everyone else.
Right. We love all comments except those. Block and Order is meant for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing that we say is meant to be construed as legal advice, except what I said before. Please hire your own representatives if you're going to take the plunge. Neither the discussion of nor the fact that Moish and I may own any of the assets we discuss on the show is meant in any way to serve as an endorsement of such assets. A very special thank you to the man himself, producer Moish, pulling double duty yet again. So on behalf of Moish, I'm Kyle Lawrence. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.